And joining us via phone line is Fiso Mahlangu, a political analyst, Aubrey Shabalala, General Secretary for the Communications Workers Union, is in studio, and via Skype is Murray Hunter, National Coordinator for Right to Know. And thanks for all three of you joining us on various platforms. We'll start with you, Mr. Murray, or rather Murray Hunter, on your reaction so far in the 5 days of the SABC Portfolio Committee inquiry. Of course, a lot of damning evidence given by witnesses, but what's your observation so far?
Well, I think that you're right that it is damning evidence. We've seen testimony day after day about the way that Hlaudi Motsoeneng and a gang of officials around him have been waging a war of destruction on the public broadcaster. We've seen testimony of purges. We've seen testimony of a climate of fear that has affected journalists and workers at the SABC on every level. But we've also heard testimony of very, very problematic deals and deals that have been entered into by the SABC under Hlaudi Motsoeneng, including the multi-choice deal, which would see the public broadcaster selling off its crown jewels, its archives, to the commercial media, to Naspers. We've also seen evidence of, or allegations rather, that the TNA business breakfasts are being really funded by the public broadcaster, which was a quote that was used, was that the SABC executives are using funds from our public broadcaster and channeling them into a rival broadcaster, which is actually ANN7. These are very, very worrying allegations, and I think that we're expecting more to come as the weeks go on.
All right, while Parliament deliberates on this, we also have Aubrey Shabalala from the Communications Workers Union, who has a different view as to what the role of the Portfolio Committee ought to have been to somewhat minimize or mitigate the rot at the SABC before the hearings in the past 5 days.
Yes, absolutely. I think our view is that what has been presented through the 5 days is actually, you are correct, it's a damning report against SABC. But there's a number of things that has to be questioned there. For example, when this matter of multi-choice was pronounced to say that the archives of SABC have been sold, the Communication Workers Union went to SABC and to multi-choice to find out about that. We have a contract that indicates that there was no selling of the archives. However, there was a renting of the archives in terms of that contract. And we are surprised if the Portfolio Committee has to ask such question at this time, it's so late, whilst the union have done that. It means that we have an absolutely useless committee. That itself, if we have to deal with the rot of this crisis, we have to start with that Portfolio Committee to remove it absolutely, because what they are doing now is just playing at the gallery. Obviously, the bold and the beautiful, acting, appearing, share road to fame type of a type that they are doing, whilst the public broadcast have been plunged into a crisis whilst they were there. And these are the things that we must question, and we've always raised this issue as a matter of fact.
So, Murray, I mean, at the end of the day, if the board is going to, or the lone standing member of the board will either be dismissed, another interim board will be instituted. We know that in the past 10 years, there's been 12 different CEOs and musical chairs, essentially, when it comes to the leadership at the SABC. What remedy, how will this fix the problem of governance and leadership in the SABC?
I think we've been very clear that there is a need for systemic change in the SABC. The public broadcast that we saw created in the 1990s is the most important public asset that the South African public has. A media institution that is there to serve the diverse needs of our nation. And the fact that there's been so much chaos and crisis there in the last 10 years and escalating in the last 2 years is very problematic. So we've said it must start with a very transparent process to establish a new board. But there must be a much more inclusive and participatory process to review the editorial charter of the SABC, to review the role of Parliament in ensuring that the SABC is accountable to the democratic Parliament and not to the minister, and not a law unto itself. I think we need to have much more protection for workers at the SABC, and I'm a bit disappointed to see a representative of a union here with us today, not doing enough, I think, to defend the rights of workers at the SABC. We need a very, very thorough process to actually review where the SABC sits, because it needs to be a Chapter 9 institution. It needs to have the independence and the critical vigor of a public protector, of an auditor general, those sorts of institutions. It shouldn't be. We've seen a slide where the SABC is operating more like a state institution rather than a public broadcaster.
Yeah, but that would require political will and policy reform, which is another consultative process. I'm saying in the immediate what my colleague Aubrey here is saying, that even the portfolio committee themselves as an oversight body, had the opportunity to intervene at any given point to deal with this right, not now in the 11th hour.
Well, I think that the fact that it has come too late is certainly, this opportunity should have been taken a lot earlier. And we've seen Parliament really miss its role in the past. But the fact that it's happening in the 11th hour does not mean that it shouldn't happen. I think it's even more important now that really the crisis is burning and urgent for Parliament to exercise its role. And I think that we've really seen a very positive response to the way that the Parliamentary Committee is working. We've seen unified Parliament across all political lines who are actually working together and being very rigorous in the oversight that they're providing, ensuring a transparent process, ensuring that officials who are not complying with the processes, we saw the SABC withholding documents up until the weekend. This is exactly what Parliament is meant to be doing. And I think we need to support them in that process.
All right, Aubrey, just also in the sense that, the workers, some are saying that Hlaudi had brought transformation, some level of security for those who are on freelance contracts, the 90% quota, etc. Do you think there'll be impunity at the end of this entire process? What do you think will come out of it?
Quickly, let's first attend to Mr. Hunter's narratives that the trade union never defended workers. This crisis at SABC doesn't start today. Remember that Sophie Mkwena, one of the senior journalists, was once suspended, and this union fought for her. She was fighting for reporting on the news that at the time, build up to Polokwane, she was not part of the clique that was supporting a particular faction at SABC under the likes of Snuki Zigarala. Today, the Mlifes are coming out. They were a part and parcel of paging people who were reporting stories. They were quiet. We were there in the forefront. But beyond that, we have the likes of the story that they spoke about of Gaugelo in Polokwane. We are handling that case, and we've been intervening on it. So this narrative of just painting every organization that does not stand with them. Let us correct that SABC 8, the 4 journalists that were represented out of the 8, the white journalists went with DA, and they've got all their support. After they've won that case, the likes of William Vok were left outside. And that's a political play that they want to bring about. So we must correct that first. But on the issues that the SABC have, of course, that we've supported around the converting of some workers, not all by now, from the, freelancers, going to the question of casual workers to converted. Those are the things that will jealously safeguard to make sure that the transformation is ongoing. In particular, on the 90%, we are not going to back off on those things. What we are saying here is that if there were issues, why the portfolio committee will call a junior staff to come and present a case that relates to finances and the deals of the organization at SABC. It means that they knew that these things are happening, and now they've called those workers to use them, which might jeopardize their career in future, because all the employers in the media industry will know they are almost monopoly on them, and they are owned by almost same people that are watching them presenting that case. So it also jeopardizes the right of the workers. So we stand against that workers must be used just for the political purpose on this case.
Not to encourage a dialogue between the two of you, but just a quick response, Murray, on the fact that the Communications Workers Union has been doing its work, and that there are no holy cows as pertaining to the witnesses that they themselves may be blemished in certain conduct.
I think there's a very problematic smear campaign happening against the SABC 8 in particular. By the way, 5 of whom are black journalists, where they have faced intimidation, they've faced insults, they've been told that they're DA stooges, all of which are lies, by the way. They've also faced death threats. So I think that they are the most high-profile examples of journalists who have been targeted, essentially for challenging the censorship that we've seen become endemic at the SABC, and we've heard testimony about this climate of self-censorship that has become endemic at the SABC. It's very worrying to see that. One would hope that CWU would stand with him, but one of the concerning things is that we're hearing from these same testimonies that in fact there's a much deeper problem here where we may know the names of the SABC 8, but in fact, their stories are not unusual. There are many who've gone through the same processes. I do appreciate, and I don't want to enter into a dialogue, I do appreciate that there are workers at the SABC who are being represented and whose interests are being properly represented by the CWU. I do think that it is important that we see workers across the SABC uniting and, in fact, working towards a common interest. And one of the most important things there is to ensure that the governance at the top is fixed. And I don't think that anyone can really say that the governance at the top is in a good state. I think that we see compelling evidence that it's in a state of real crisis.
All right, but that's Mary Hunter, National Coordinator for Right to Know. Just how does the story end for you, very briefly, Aubrey?
Well, we agree with the fact that we must, particularly on the issue of where people receive threats, we will remain opposed to that. We want to support those workers in terms of them opening the case. I think it's a serious matter. Journalists must not be threatened. We are saying that there are issues, and we have always been consistent, like we have done with some cases, that those workers that are prejudiced at the newsroom, they must bring those matters so that we can deal with them effectively. But where we don't want to agree to is when this ploy is being used purely for political purposes and not in defense of the interest of the SABC as a South African Broadcasting Corporation and in the interest of workers. That's where we are as Communication Workers Union.